Hey, friends and allies, thanks so much for joining us today for another episode of Recalibrate, our monthly rallying call for all of our friends, all of our ministry allies. My name is Josh Overton, and I have the privilege of working closely with some of our church allies here in Zoweh. And today I'm going to give you part two of our Recalibrate call from December, which is when we sat around the topic and we talked about what are some resources, right? What are 5 resources that I can use in my men's ministry, in my small group? So if you missed part one of that, make sure you go back and watch it. It should be linked right here in the card in the video. But today is part two. So right now, I want to give you, along with Cole Phillips, I want to give you 5 resources that you can use in your small groups and in your men's ministry to propel you forward. But I'm telling you, make sure you watch part one first. So pause, watch part one. If you've already done that, great. Enjoy part two.
All right, so just a couple resources, guys, and then I'd love to hear from you too. All right, fellas. Number one, any guesses on what if this was Family Feud, and I asked you the number one resource to use in your men's resource and in your groups? Survey would say the Heart of a Warrior. That's right. I saw it. Yes, the Heart of a Warrior. I am a company man. Yes, no, the Heart of a Warrior. I mean, we believe it. We believe the message of it, and I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand like we're in small group again, but I guarantee you every single one of you have read The Heart of a Warrior, and you probably have done it in your groups. But even if you have, it's going to be even richer to dive back into it. Because if you're like me, and if you're like most men that I know, and probably in your groups too, when you go into that, when you start reading that book, you're not reading it necessarily in a way where you're soaking it all in. I mean, you go on a journey on that book, right? I mean, it is a roller coaster of like tick, 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 woof. And then next thing you know, you're upside down and you're round and around. I mean, it is a roller coaster of all kinds of emotions from, well, that's not true about me. Oh no, really, it is true, right? You're getting defensive, or you're completely just like zeroing in on one specific thing. But it's the next time you come back, you notice something. It's just like your favorite movies, man. I've watched Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit more times than I'd like to admit. But I'm telling you, every single time I watch them, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never noticed that before. I've never seen that before. And it's just it's something new. And so I want to definitely encourage you to read The Heart of a Warrior again. And maybe take some time off. If you just finished it, maybe you don't go right back into it, but I can promise you it will be rich if and when you return to it. And you guys know this, we have a couple resources around The Heart of a Warrior that can really help enhance that. If you've already been through it one time, you can't go wrong by getting the journal workbook. And as a group leader, if you're a group leader on this call, it does a lot of the work for you. The questions are there. I mean, you can pace this and move through this as slow as you need to. And again, because it's not about a formula, it's not about getting chapter done, next book. It's about freedom. Freedom takes time. Redemption takes time. You got to sand. I use 3 different grains of sandpaper on my table to clear it off. Right. In my younger days, I would have put one slap on the sander, the electronic sander, and then moved on. But this time I knew what I needed to do to get it as smooth and to remove all the blemishes and all of the paint stains. I took the time. It takes time. Freedom over formula. Journal workbook is honestly one of the best companion guides you can get. I would encourage you to do that. I'll drop a link for that in the chat later as well. We also have what we call the expedition, which is really beautiful if you're a new group, or perhaps you're thinking about starting your group and you're just, I don't really know how this works. You know, if the goal isn't getting through the book, but the goal is conversation and relationship and questions, I need some help with that. Well, that's why the expedition was created. It is literally a video series of Michael and some of the guide team sitting around having a conversation, much like you will do with your men, about the chapters in the book that they've read. And so it's a great companion. You can get that and you can watch it as a group, or the way I've done it before is I've had my guys watch it during the week. So that way, if you're meeting like most guys, you're probably meeting 90 minutes, 2 hours tops. Well, if you watch the video together, that's an hour or give or take right there. So you don't want to rush that, right? So I advise my guys, I encourage my guys to watch it prior. And then we talked about it and use that as a launch pad. And let's be honest, gentlemen, almost all of us are here on this call because of the message that found us in the Heart of a Warrior. That's why we believe in it. Mm-hmm. What would a man's life look like truly, if he had nothing to hide, proven fear? The message is a much needed message to men, so we believe in it. Number 2, you guys could probably guess this on Family Feud as well. Wild at heart. And I'm just going to add this caveat. There you go. I see you, Brian. I'm going to add this caveat. Really, any book from the Elders Library is going to be a great book to take your men through. But let me just talk about Wild at Heart for just a minute. I mean, this tagline alone, right? Every man wants an adventure to live, a battle to fight, and a beauty to rescue. I mean, that is one of the most accurate masculine mission statements for a man that I've ever heard. Every epic narrative that I've ever watched or read, it pretty much nails it, right? That's the stories that we love to watch. It's the stories that we love to read. Why? Why do we love to watch them? Why do we love to read them? Because we want to live them. And Wild at Heart does a beautiful job of unpacking that. So if you've gone through Heart of a Warrior, this is a great part 2. Wild at Heart was the foundation for so much of what Zoweh is and has become. And if there's someone on the call here that's been to a Wild at Heart boot camp, maybe you can talk about that at the end. I'd love for you to share. It was foundational. It's foundational. The brotherhood, the friendship, the fellowship. Michael saw it, chased after it, brought men around him to live this adventure, to fight a battle, to find a beauty to rescue. And now we've gotten everything that we are living and walking in right now through Zoweh because of that. So obviously it works, but guess what? It wasn't a formula, right? And it wasn't just a resource. It was relationship and it was freedom. That's what they pursued. And that's what we want to encourage you to pursue in your own life and with the men that you have in your groups. And I just think those are 2 of the best resources you can do. To continue on with some of the Eldridge Library, my personal favorite book that he ever wrote is Fathered by God. And I don't know if it's just because of where I am in my life. I've got 2 boys who are 7 and 8. My daughter is 10. But specifically for my boys, it does a wonderful job of unpacking the stages of the masculine heart, from boyhood all the way up through sage, elder, right? Just a beautiful job of unpacking that. But for me, and a little bit of, again, this is why story is so important, guys. My story is I was not fathered well. Just wasn't. And that book was the first piece of literature, the first source really that I read that helped me understand how God was fathering me and how he desired to father me. So how he had already done that and how he wanted to do that moving forward. And that included by helping me father my boys better. I have been as loved by God by loving my boys well than anything else. It just touches a place in me that I didn't get that, but now I get a chance to give that. And as I'm giving that, I'm getting that back. Does that make sense? And that book really helped me understand that. This is a quote from the book. You are the son of a kind, strong, and engaged father. Well, if you weren't fathered well, that's really hard for you to understand how that's true about God. A strong, kind, engaged father, a father wise enough to guide you in the way, generous enough to provide for your journey, offering to walk with you every step. This perhaps is the hardest thing for us to believe, to really believe deep down in our hearts. So when you do believe it, it changes everything. It changes forever. It changes the way that we approach each and every day. So it's a phenomenal book that I think will bless you personally. If you are a father or a grandfather, I mean, man, I know a lot of grandfathers that might not be able to verbalize this or want to admit this. This is why I think the Elder Sage Initiative is so beautiful. a lot of grandfathers who don't get the fathering stage right want to make sure they get the grandfather stage right. They want to make, and they might not be able to verbalize that. They may not want to admit that, but that desire is there. It's there. And so this book is a beautiful step in that direction. If you have fathers, young fathers, fathers of teenagers, or even grandparents, right, in your circle, this would be a great book to walk through. And there's so many more by him. Waking the Dead is a great one. Beautiful Outlaw. Those are two really, really phenomenal men's ministry manuals, honestly, to go through. That was 3A. Let me give you 3B in the same realm of fatherhood. Okay. And again, grandparents too, uncles. If you got a chance to pour into a young man, okay, you need to read Raising a Modern Day Knight by Robert Lewis. Now, this book, I actually bought the audio version. And when I bought it, I didn't realize it was so old that it only came on CDs. So I was like, what? I can't get this on my Audible? Like I can't, no MP3? Like it literally is just CDs. But you can buy the physical copy of the book, but I wanted to listen to it as I was driving. And so then this is a quote from the book. Sons are looking for the substance of life. And as I hope to prove, they hunger for the best things. In the absence of these anchors, sons drift. But when loving dads add these into the manhood mix, their sons flourish. They become noblemen, gentlemen, men of valor, principal men, knights. So the beautiful opportunity, I think, this is Josh Overton for a second, okay? I think Zoweh would subscribe to this too, but I just want to put that disclaimer out. I think one of the most beautiful opportunities that you guys have, that we have, who are leading other men and leading ourselves, is maybe you're not a father. Maybe you know your kids are growing out the house, whatever. Maybe this doesn't apply to you directly, but I think we have an incredible opportunity to not just impact dads, but to impact the men that I, as a dad, need and want in my kid's life. So now it's not just me trying to teach and model and implement and reinforce these things. I have a brotherhood of men that if my boys are around, I'm not embarrassed by that. I'm not worried what my boys may pick up. I'm not nervous that my kids may be wounded because, or at least less wounded, right? Because I've got other oriented men who also have nothing to hide, proven fear, who also want an adventure to live, a battle to fight, a beauty to rescue. And they care as much about my boys as I do, right? And so we collectively get to teach them and be those anchors for them. So I think that's beautiful. So to go through this and say, and to look at everyone in your circle and say, hey, you may not be a dad yet, or your kids may already be out of the house. But what about John? What about Cole, right? And Cole's got Elijah and Isaiah. And we get to come around Cole and help him raise his sons, right? We get to be a part of, if we're invited into that. And if what we're hoping is taking place in your circle is happening, well, then that invitation is going to come, right? You want to be, and I think that's just a beautiful, beautiful opportunity that we have. So yeah, Fathered by God by John Eldredge and Raising a Modern Day Knight by Robert Lewis. The last two are not books. And I think I was supposed to give you 5 books, but I gave you 3. So I'll give you some honorable mentions here in a few minutes. But again, they're not books. And I just want to say this, and then I'm going to ask Cole to step up and talk a little bit. Because him and I were having a conversation, unpacking some of this earlier in the office. And I love what he said, and I wanted to invite him to share it. But I want to say this. Number 4, write this down if you can. He who has eyes to see and ears to hear. If you've been to a weekend, I know you've heard that. There's obviously, it's coined in the Bible, but we say it and pray that prayer all the time at our weekend gatherings. He who has eyes to see and ears to hear. What I mean by that is, if you've been to one of our weekends, there is no way that you've ever been able to watch a movie the same. I'm a guy who loves movies. I love narratives. I love stories. I love art. I'm always moved by it. But the first time I went to a Heart of a Warrior weekend and saw the Matrix trailer and the Lord of the Rings trailer and Bagger Vance, and then Michael gives 10 talks out of them, those trailers. I'm like, oh my God. Like, and so now all of a sudden I'm seeing things that I was like, I've watched this movie 3 times and I've never seen that. Or I saw it, but I didn't have the eyes to see it, the ears to hear, to see what I saw and hear what I heard. Now all of a sudden, Aragorn's journey from Ranger to King means everything to me. I mean, in my office at the tower, not this office, but my work office, I've got Aragorn's sword hanging in my office with some of the Lord of the Rings quotes all over my wall because of how much it means to me. But I was already a fan of the movie, but it wasn't until I went there and saw the epicness to see the story, the larger story that my story is in and the role that I have to play. Oh man, now I can't watch a movie and not see. Greatest Showman is another one that moves me and connects with me almost to tears every time, no matter how many times I've watched it. It just speaks to me. So I say that to say, again, if freedom and relationship is what you're valuing in your groups, then you can read almost anything, and you don't even have to read a book. You might just want to watch something. Maybe so we'll get to that in a minute. But before I go further, kind of with those lenses on, if you will, I want you to think through that as Cole shares a little bit about something that he's walking through personally, and maybe something you can do in your groups too. Cole?
Thanks. Yeah, so Josh mentioned that we were talking in the office as he was preparing for this tonight. And I had shared with him probably some time ago that I've got a list of books that I've started reading through for myself. Sometime early last year, I did a search for 100 books that every man should read. And part of that was 25 Westerns that every man should read. And in the exploration of that, I have since launched into other spheres. But I told Josh when he asked me about resources that I think are important for men's groups, I had mentioned to him that I, as a consumer, I'm always drawn to stories, to fiction over self-helpy type things. It's where my flavors lie. So I mentioned to him that I'm always a fan in a circle of guys that understand how to ask the right questions, understand how to watch the Matrix trailer and pick things out. I'm always a fan of, I don't know, what would you say, breaking the norm, maybe. So Wild at Heart is a great book. The Heart of a Warrior is a great book. And the Heart of a Warrior is one of the best for, as an introduction into your own heart and the journey that you're on. But as you've read through it a number of times, or if you've been through it a number of times, or you're looking for something different, what I shared with Josh is that right now I'm actually finding a lot of life and heart study just in reading comic books. I'm eyeballs deep in an X-Men comic from 1991, and I'd be hard pressed to find you a better story about camaraderie and brotherhood in the face of adversity, and facing adversity with gentle strength, not with aggressive angst. My favorite book in the world is To Kill a Mockingbird, and it has been since I was 13, I think, because I genuinely believe I could spend the rest of my life studying Atticus Finch and not get tired of it. There's a number of other things. Like I said, I looked up 25 Westerns, so I think I've read like 6 of them. Michael and Jeff Shara have a great series on, it's not really a series, a trilogy from the Civil War. It's a historical fiction trilogy based on obviously a historical event that I can't recommend enough. And these are things that for me, as someone that sits around in a circle with Josh and some of the other guys from time to time, like I will start salivating if you tell me that we're going to read a fictional book and talk about it. I can't get enough of that. And so if you're in a place with groups where I've been before, Josh has been before, probably everybody in the group has been before at some point, of feeling like you need something different, something new, my encouragement is by all means branch out, because if you have the eyes to see and ears to hear, as Josh said, it almost doesn't matter what you go for. You can watch any movie or pick up any book and be able to ask questions. I was with some guys a few weeks ago, and we were talking for well over an hour and a half, and the only question that was asked was, "What's God teaching you right now? What's God showing your heart?" And I was with me. I think it was me and 4 other guys. That's 5 total, and that was an hour and a half long conversation off of one question, because they know how to ask the question. They know how to ask it in their own hearts. So
That's
get
so
creative.
good, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I love that you reemphasized it at the end. The reason that we're able to say, hey, it almost doesn't matter, is because the goal of it was never the resource. The goal of it was never the formula. The formula was the freedom. The formula was the relationship. And so now there's trust there. I've heard some of your story. You've heard some of my story. And you guys know how it is. Like anytime you get together with guys that you've known for a long time, that you've gone on adventures with, that you've shared experiences with, it's almost like I might not have seen you physically for a year, but it's within 10 minutes. We're past all that, and we're right back to as if we've hung out every day, right? There's time invested there. And so again, the resources do matter, but not as much as a relationship. And so again, it can be an X-Men comic. Cole, just to kind of further that example a little more, Cole was sharing something very personal with me today, and then we brought up Wolverine, and not to share too much because I want to honor the story in his heart, but I was like, man, as we've talked about this, that is a perfect example, right, of what's going on, and it led us to some great conversations about his heart, about his situation, about what was going on. And I didn't say a lot. I just listened and asked a question or two and listened. And so it can be anything. I'm reading The Hobbit with my boys right now. Man, you want to talk about introducing someone to the larger story, right? Adventure to live, battle to fight, some beauty to rescue. It's all right there. And I'm able to teach it and show them that. It's just, I'm talking like, even with guys, I mean, it's read the book and then watch the movie, which brings me to number 5. Number 5 is do a movie night. I don't know if we have any fellas from the barn here. I know you guys do that. Maybe you can speak to it if you're here in just a moment, but the barn, our allies, our friends down in Charlotte, they do this all the time. They get together and they watch Bagger Vance. They have a couple questions ready to go, and then they break into groups and they talk about, what did you see? What did you hear? Do any of these characters represent something that you desire? It's beautiful. Right now, every Wednesday, me, Cole, and SJ, we're going through the Band of Brothers miniseries right now. Some great lessons to learn right there. Some great value to see. Some great questions to ask. Some great stories to share. And so again, if you've got the eyes to see and the ears to hear, you can utilize so much. The movies that we show at the weekend, you guys that have been, that in the book that you get, the booklet that you get at the beginning of the weekend, it has like 30 movie recommendations in there, including the ones that we use clips from all weekend long. Maybe just, after you finish whatever book you're on, take a few weeks and do some movie nights together. You would be surprised. If you've never done it, I guarantee you'll be surprised at the progress that you make in your men's group, in the conversations, in the relational equity, just by watching a movie and then spending 30 minutes talking about it after. It'll blow your mind. It'll be so many light bulbs going off in there. It'll light up the whole block, man. So those are my 5.2 resources, right? Heart of a Warrior, Wild at Heart, Fathered by God, Raising a Modern Day Knight, Movie Night, and then honestly, again, because it's about relationship and it's about freedom, almost anything, because it's not about the resource. It's about the relationship. In the chat, I went ahead and posted the links to Fathered by God and Raising a Modern Day Knight if you'd like to find those. I'll give you a couple more honorable mention, and then we're going to end the recording and then open it up for any discussion or questions that you guys may have. But a couple honorable mentions. Search and Rescue, of course, by Michael Thompson is a great. If you haven't read it, I would strongly encourage you to do it. It's the book that hooked me first because it introduced me to the larger story. All these things that I desired my whole life. Again, adventure to live, battle to fight, all these things, beauty to rescue. It was right in front of me and I just couldn't see it. I didn't know it. And Search and Rescue is really great at bringing the message of orientation, knowing who you are, where you are, the good that God is up to in your life. It's Your Call is by Gary Barkalow, who, of course, is on the guide team on the weekends. When you want to talk about a man that has questions about his life, his purpose, his roles, his glory. Now, how do I bring what I'm learning in Heart of a Warrior? How do I bring that into my marriage? How do I bring that into my 9 to 5? How do I bring that into the different roles I play? It's Your Call is the field manual that you want to go through for that 100%. If you're looking for, if you guys are like, well, I'm just ready to go deep. I just want, and I used to hear that all the time as a pastor. I just want to go deep. Well, you can't get much deeper than Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. Go get that and chew on that for a little bit. See how deep you really want to get. And then last one is Barbarian's Way by Erwin McManus, who is a pastor out in California. And man, I listen to his sermons on a regular basis because his ability, it's like watching someone paint the most beautiful painting you've ever seen. The way he presents, not just in Barbarian's Way, but just almost anything he communicates. It's beautiful. But Barbarian's Way is a fantastic, if you're looking for something that is true to the masculine message of Zoweh and Wild at Heart. And what I mean by that is it's about being, not doing, because a lot of men's books out there are about do, right? That's how we led tonight's conversation is our entire life is measured by that. We don't want our groups to be measured by that, right? So there's a lot of books you can find, self-help, do. Barbarian's Way is truer to the heart of what we believe is true about masculine men, like with Wild at Heart. So that's a great resource to dive into if you want to stay in the same sphere, but maybe something a little different. I would check that out. Barbarian's Way by Erwin McManus. But again, thank you so much for hanging out tonight, whether you're here live on Recalibrate or if you're watching this later on YouTube. Can't wait to see you next month. Second Thursday of every month is Recalibrate, and we'll see you then.
Hey, thanks again for taking the time to watch today. We really appreciate it. As always, make sure you like and subscribe. That guarantees that you don't miss any of the content that we have coming out right here on YouTube. And be sure that you're with us live for the next Recalibrate, second Thursday of every single month, zoweh.org/allies. Thanks.